I'm now joined in New York by business strategist Tara Dowdell. She's the founder of her own strategic consulting and marketing firm. And welcome to Biz Asia America. And I was walking around outside on the streets earlier today, and people seem to be in a fairly good mood, taking everything here in stride. I want you to help us understand what is going to be, perhaps not today, but the longer-term impact to Americans over the next week or 2 weeks if this remains unresolved.
Well, I think there will be big and devastating impacts to the country. I think one element of this story that's not getting explored is the fact that our federal government is the single largest purchaser of goods and services in the world. And so what that means is you have a lot of businesses who not only rely on the government as the government, but the government is also their client. So that's one of the element of the story that's not being discussed. All of those businesses, if this continues, may not get paid, may not be able to fulfill the obligations of their contract, and may not continue their work. And so that multiplies throughout our economy. So we are a consumption-based economy, as you well know. And so we need consumption. We need people spending. And the more money that comes out of people's pockets, the worse it is for our economy at this point.
Well, to spend money, they first have to be here for the most part. And we're talking about visitors from around the world, whether they're coming from Europe or from Asia. How big is the impact in terms of international visitors when you say coming to national parks or coming to a place like Washington, D.C., where the museums are closed, or going to New York City and having the Statue of Liberty closed? Is the U.S. basically closed to tourists for the most part who want to visit the national parks?
Well, yeah, Philip, that's exactly right. Because if you look at a lot of our luxury industry, a lot of our tourism industry has been driven by or being, boosted up, especially during the real economic downturn. A lot of our industry has been boosted up by foreign travelers, by Europeans, by Asian travelers, and also people shopping in stores. So it really does reverberate throughout the economy. And as this story gets bigger, as people hear about it more and more, they're not going to look to come to the United States because they can't visit those places.
And so if they're not coming here, the businesses here, and I'm not talking about just the chain companies, I'm talking about individual mom and pop and small business owners. If they're not able to sell goods to these tourists, let alone the millions that are affected from the government furloughs, how much of an impact is this likely to have on businesses?
It's going to be devastating, especially, like you said, for the moms and pops. When you think about the gift shops inside of museums, when you think about the vendors outside of museums, when you think about the stuff that parks and other national treasures actually buy and purchase, those are coming primarily from smaller businesses. A lot of the businesses that benefit the most from tourism are actually mom and pop. They're not the big retail chains in many parts of the country.
I just want to follow up on that. I'm very surprised that big business and small business is not up in arms over what's happening here in Washington, D.C. They're the ones that are going to be affected as well, but they're not speaking up, at least not that I've heard yet, and I wonder why.
Well, I think you're seeing some people start to speak up. I think a lot of people thought that this would be like the last time. There would be an 11th hour agreement reached. And as it became clearer that that wasn't going to happen, I think initially the market is priced in a lot of this. But I think as this goes on, I think that's not going to be the case. And I think people don't feel it immediate. The impact is not going to be immediate, but the damage can be long term. This is a very different time than in 1995 and 1996 when we had a 3-week shutdown. We had a much stronger economy, and I think you are going to see a lot more of the business community speak out and speak up against this.
How many days do you think this can go before we start hearing about this in the Main Street press in terms of how much it's affecting the economy?
I think as each day passes, literally, I think we're going to start hearing more and more stories, because when people start to feel it directly, that's when people respond. And like I said, initially, people don't feel it directly. And so they're not as up in arms, and they're also, oh, Washington bickering again. But as this starts to get out more and people see relatives who are sitting at home and not at work, and as people, and another point though is back to my earlier point, a lot of people don't realize how much their company or their business that they work for relies on the federal government in terms of government contracting. So those people, as they start to feel the effects personally, I think that's when you're going to see the real groundswell and the real pushback against this. And I think the pressure is primarily going to be on the Republican Party.
Tara Dowdell, I want to thank you very much for explaining what the impact is, just not on Americans, but also to visitors from around the world.